You're watching BionicDance. Don't run on automatic, instead, please think.
Could there ever be an atheist on a sinking ship?
If I'm on a sinking ship, I want to be surrounded by nothing but atheists, because they're not going to pray. They're going to start building rafts. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. I've come to the opinion that there is a small but significant difference in the atheist worldview, the non-believer paradigm, versus that of believers, namely that the God-botherers cannot fathom a mind that does not have an inherent place for belief in a deity, that there is an emptiness that must be filled. And so many insist that, should an atheist find themselves in a desperate situation, sudden God belief will manifest. And I sure hope not. Who do you think will prevail when, for example, trapped in a building fire? The one who gets down on their knees begging for magical help? Or the one who looks around at the available resources and tries to devise a means of escape? Which one would you rather have with you, really? And even the more prominent religions claim that God will help those who help themselves, don't they? But if you can help yourself, what do you need a God for?
Before we talk about atheists on sinking ships, I want to speak about something related to this, which is very powerful and important. And that is to do with knowledge, truth, certainty. How do we arrive at these things? See, we live in a world where atheists, generally people, promote this idea that science is the only way to truth, that, we need logical, rational argumentation to believe in something, accept something, to be certain of something.
Part of the problem here is terminology. Truth is a very slippery concept because it actually can be subject to opinion, perception, and other conceptual matters. When a person is sworn in at a trial, they're told to speak truthfully, meaning they aren't going to lie, but that doesn't mean they're correct. They're simply not being dishonest. On the other hand, the term fact deals with the empirical, the objective, the at least potentially provable, verifiable, not subject to perception. Someone may be wrong about a fact, but the fact will always be so, regardless of their perception. Science seeks to discover and verify facts, not truths. This is why science has often had to change, because what was once thought to be true has been found to be an error by a better understanding through examination of the facts, and needs correcting. To conflate truth and fact as if they are the same muddies the subject in ways that are unacceptable, that confuse the issue such that any conclusions reached will be an error. And the rather liberal use of the word something in this discussion only further blurs the lines. There are indeed some things that science cannot easily address, but most of them are ideals, preferences, and opinions, far too many of which are treated as fact when they have no objective basis.
That's why we say science is amoral. It can't tell you about moral truths, for example, right? So science isn't the only way to truth.
And this is why conflating fact and truth in one's lexicon is a bad idea. All too often, moral truths are treated as absolute objective facts instead of preferences, ideals. No matter how many people hold the same morality, no matter how strongly it is held, morality can never be a fact. If there were no thinking beings to hold it, morality would cease to exist because it's a product of the mind and not inherent to the universe.
And even that being said, most of the things we believe that scientists tell us is based on their say-so, their testimony.
And this is just sheer ignorance. Science has this thing called peer review, in which experiments are repeated by unbiased parties, other scientists who have no stake in the outcome other than gaining knowledge. And not just the results, but the procedures, measurements, equipment lists, everything will be published. You don't have to take anybody else's say-so in science. If you're of a mind, you can check anything for yourself.
And the majority of the things we believe in as human beings is based on testimony, which is another route to knowledge.
Listening to testimony is a route to knowing what someone else thinks about a subject, nothing more. It doesn't tell you anything about the real world beyond that person's state of mind. And I can't help feeling like there's an implied double standard here, that scientific testimony isn't trustworthy, but a casual conversation, or a lecture, or a sermon. Well, those are totally legit. I admit that comes more from his presentation. Taken literally, his words don't mean that. Yet, the truth is he sounded that way, even if I'm factually wrong about his intent.
See, when we study the Quran, Allah seldom does He try to prove His existence through argumentation and these types of proofs. Instead, what God does is He, for example, speaks about His signs, right? And signs are something far more powerful because the entire universe is a sign. You are a sign.
What possible reason do we have for thinking they're signs? Because they're powerful? Your emotional reaction does not equal fact and is certainly no indication that a God exists, at least not outside of your own mind, your own imagination. Given the available data, that's the only place a God might exist. If you hope to be convincing, you're gonna have to do better than that.
Unlike a generic logical argument, isn't this more powerful? Isn't God giving you something much more than you're asking for?
Nope, not even a tiny bit. If I'm being given anything, and I don't think I am, I see no explanation for what has happened in my life that would require a God, then what I've been given is ambiguous as hell, specifically because I can find perfectly mundane, natural reasons for everything that's happened in my life. No God required. I don't find that powerful in the least. Something clear, explicit, unambiguous, something for which there can be no mistake. That would be giving me something. These so-called signs, if that's what they are more like being teased. Any God that could show up, but who demands faith of us instead, is a manipulative control freak, and not the benevolent ruler his followers try to claim.
Think about this, even as an atheist for a second. Reflect over your life. And I'm sure you've had experiences, occasions in your life where you've been stuck, you've faced death, something's happened. And at that moment, you've had no other option, no one to turn to, and you've turned to God, and He has sufficed you. He's taken you out of that situation.
And this is what I was talking about at the beginning. Too many theists just can't conceive of a life that doesn't have a God in it, even if only as that empty God space that needs filling. But that's simply not how everybody lives, and it's high time they learned and accepted this. Myself? Okay, no, I've never faced death like that, at least not my own. I've probably told this story before. I have rotten tasting girlfriends. I keep trying to date a real-life tank girl, but in real life, tank girl doesn't just come with issues, she comes with a whole subscription. I need to start going after lipstick lesbians from now on. Or maybe a bisexual chick, I don't know. Point is, 2 exes ago, I was dating an alcoholic crack addict. I didn't know this about her when we first got together. I just thought she was kind of badass. I probably should have gotten out of there right away when I found out, but what can I say? I was in love and I was stupid. Well, one morning after her smoking crack the night before, I'm waking up to her still bouncing off the walls like someone who'd chugged 2 liters of Mountain Dew, right up until the point where her eyes rolled up in the back of her head. I didn't know that really happened. I thought it was just a Hollywood trope. She falls against the wall, slides down, passes out, and stops breathing. Wide awake now. Did I call upon God? Hell no. I started giving her mouth-to-mouth and called on 911 in between breaths. And that's a damn good thing I did, too, or she'd be dead. Mind you, she's an ex, so in my darker moments I wonder whether I did the right thing. But I saved her ass because I relied on myself, not on a God.
And even as Muslims, unfortunately, we've turned to this idea that we need logical proofs for God, we need scientific data for God, even if it's indirect scientific data, so on and so forth. We don't. Allah is directing us towards something that will give us more real true certainty.
I'd like someone to identify anything else we'd accept in this way. Something, anything that goes beyond idea or concept, something that does not require a mind to exist. Name for me anything of that nature for which we wouldn't demand far more stringent criteria to be filled before we grant that the claim of its reality is acceptable. Go on. I'm waiting. Why does God get to be this big ol' exception?
So this is why in this verse, chapter 31, verse 32, let's look at the end of the verse. God tells us that nobody denies His signs except for he who is an ungrateful traitor.
Everybody's holy book says that. Explain why we should listen to yours instead of someone else's, or none of them, and why these alleged signs would all have perfectly natural explanations, but which must be accepted as an all-powerful being playing a really fucked up version of charades, and if we don't, then we're traitors. Do you really not see how fucking ridiculous that sounds?
And when we've seen this, a grateful person, when he sees these blessings in his life, his hands, his feet, his teeth, his eyes,
why do we have to keep explaining to theists how perfect the human body isn't? The jaw is too small for the teeth. The light-sensitive portion of the eyes actually faces backward and has a rather large blind spot right in the middle of each one. The hips and birth canal are far too narrow, and so on, and so on. The human body is in no way a blessing. It's a mess, a mishmash of parts that survived natural selection, true, but that doesn't mean it was optimized in any way. Evolution only makes things good enough, not perfect.
When he realizes these blessings, and he just doesn't go through life like this person who's sleeping. When he realizes these signs, he's grateful. And when you're grateful, you have to be grateful to someone. You can't just be grateful for the sake of being grateful, right?
That's backward. It doesn't matter how you feel. Something can't exist just because you want to be grateful to it. You love life. You think it's great to be alive. Good. Run with that. But don't go making up religions just because the natural course of the universe led to circumstances that you enjoy.
But God is telling us those people, right, that deny His signs are truly ungrateful, and they're truly traitors because they turn away, even after the signs come to them.
One interesting thing about being an even slightly known YouTuber, come Christmas time, some of your subscribers will send you stuff off of your Amazon wish list. Very generous of them, and I'm quite grateful. Only sometimes they don't send it with a note. I don't know who to thank. I just know I have something I like. I want to thank someone, but I wasn't given sufficient information to know who deserves it. There's also a way to send someone something that isn't on their wish list, even if you don't have their mailing address. And that item isn't always something you want. You might end up a little less grateful, even if it is the thought that counts. Now, like I said, the human body isn't perfect. Even without considering the flaws I already listed, some people were born just plain unattractive by most people's standards. Or maybe you're nearsighted or farsighted. Maybe you're allergic to peanuts. Maybe you're too big, too small, too fat, too skinny, or any other number of problems. You were given something that wasn't on your anatomical wish list, so to speak. And there was certainly no note left for you saying who sent it. And the analogy breaks down a bit because we have no biological Amazon to log on to. The closest we can come to placing our own orders is plastic surgery. Point being, it's difficult to be grateful when you aren't given a note. And these so-called signs that Dude Boy here keeps talking about are definitely not close enough to a note to be taken as anything but perfectly natural events.
And what's even more powerful in this verse, if we look at the beginning of this verse, God highlights or points us towards another one of His signs, a very powerful sign. It's an experience. God says when some people are at sea, and these waves start coming, high waves which cover them and shade them, and the boats are rocking, and they don't know if they're going to make it out alive. At this point, people turn towards God in sincere faith, in sincere religion, and they worship God, and they pray to God, and they ask God to save them. Ask yourselves the question, in these situations, what logical proof are you basing your belief on?
It's pretty obvious that logic is playing no role here at all. Panic is the culprit, sheer emotional overload. But this seems to be being touted as being a good reason to start engaging in some terrified wishful thinking, an imminent death conversion. Sounds, from where I'm standing, rather similar to a hostage begging for their life with a gun pointed at their head. You'll say or do anything to live, even if it goes against your principles or beliefs. Throw everything at the wall and see whether something sticks. If these are the tactics your God has to resort to in order to get people to convert, His is not the side I could in good conscience join.
When you're on a plane, so many thousands of feet up, and you experience turbulence and the plane is rocking and you don't know what's going on, and you start praying, even as an atheist, at that moment you start praying internally.
Again, unable to fathom a world where God doesn't have a reserved spot, filled or unfilled. The closest I'll get to prayer is hoping the pilot has skill enough to see us through. The human is the one I'm depending on, because the earthling is the one at the controls.
See, the reality is these are signs. And then further down, God gives us another sign, which is when He delivers you safely to land.
I don't even really need to answer this shit. I'll let the meme that's been going around the internet for quite some time do it for me. I'll start agreeing with you that it's a sign just as soon as the plane can land itself with neither pilot nor autopilot of any kind. Until then, you're just giving God undeserved credit that belongs to someone else.
Unfortunately, many people deliberately deny these signs. They deliberately turn away. And God gives everyone signs.
Unfortunately, many people see as signs things which are entirely natural but evoke great emotion, deliberately believe they're omens. But not everyone is so easily self-deluded. See how easy that is to turn around? You still have to show us you're right and we're not.
This is true injustice to oneself. Then these people, they want evidence, they want proof of God. It's like saying somebody walking out on a very sunny, bright day on a beach, goes to a seaside and the sun is shining, they stick their head in the sand and then they say, give me proof of the sun.
It's nothing like that at all. The sun can be seen, the light and heat from it can be measured. Even someone with their head in the sand could feel the sun's rays on their back, physically. When a God can be empirically, objectively detected just as much, then we'll have to consider your case rather more strongly. Until then, you're just weaving fairy tales.
This is what we're doing. The signs are all around us, just like the blazing sun that will surround this person. But if you choose to stick your head in the sand and then ask for evidence for God, unfortunately, there's no one that can help you.
The problem is that, even if you're right, all you have are these alleged signs. They cannot be investigated. They cannot be used to lead us to more definitive facts. Maybe to you they look like signs, but from where do they originate? How do we verify that they've come from a god? Answer: we can't. So when you're asked for evidence of a god's existence, we're only asking for the same kind of evidence a scientist would use to follow a sign of something natural to a better understanding of its origin. That should not be too much to ask. That theists treat this request for testable, verifiable evidence as treason against their gods is a lot more about them and their religion than it does about those asking.
And realize, just to conclude and summarize, don't go by this false narrative and idea that science is the only way to truth, logical arguments are the only way to truth. No, God is giving you something far more personal, far more powerful.
If you really think God is more powerful than science, then empty your gas tank and run the car solely on God's power. Let God's power heal you instead of using human-researched and created medicines. Go jump out of a plane without a parachute. God will catch you. And who needs a job when God's power will grant you food, clothing, and shelter? Right? Yeah, I didn't think so. Next time you want to talk about what we believe in and why, be prepared to put your money where your mouth is, kiddo. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.
And remember, if it can't be in your hand, it's all in your head.